Hello and welcome to FPL IQ, where we have a special guest today. Before we get into what we're going to talk about, Mira, how you doing? Welcome to FPL IQ. You want to just introduce yourself? How you doing?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rob, and thanks, gang, for having me today. Really appreciate being a guest on your channel. It's fantastic. So I'm Mira. I'm FPL Mez8 on Twitter. I'm playing FPL for this is my third season now. In the game, it's really difficult to sort of watch them over here, but yeah, definitely sort of been getting into it over the last couple of years, and having a great season so far. But hopefully, we'll be changing that soon.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are generally, I've seen on Twitter, some experienced players are having what they're deeming as nightmare unlucky seasons. But sometimes I also we've all been doing it for so long. I think sometimes having a more newer player to the game is better, because I think it's a different game sometimes, and we can get stuck in our old ways of style of play, and I think the game's quite a bit different now. But I'm joined again, of course, by Tien and Teacher, Planner. Tien, how you doing?
Yeah, good. I think we had such a roller coaster game week, right? I think my rank started around 900k. After a Super Saturday, I shoot all the way up to 300-400k. I think like, oh, what a green arrow, awesome. And then Sunday just brought me all the way back down to earth. I think 1.3 million or something, and then Newcastle play, and then Trippier single-handedly got me back to where I was. So it's just such a roller coaster, and I'm all for it. I'm all in for it. It's the game that we love.
I tell you, I went from 560. I started the game week, and I went to 150 after Super Saturday. Right? I went from 150 to 623.
Wow.
And then after Newcastle, I've gone back to 560. So I'm literally exactly where I was before it's all started. And I've jumped like a million, like 500,000 up, 500,000 down in a day. I hate it. Lucian, Teacher FPL, how you doing, buddy?
What is this thing called rank? I have no idea what you guys are talking about. What?
I need to check our rank.
What? I mean, I took a hit to bring in 2 Newcastle defenders. Whoop-de-doo. I'm over the moon. Yeah, I sold Chilwell. I sold an injured Aurier, and life is good. I'll take that.
Ooh, so what we are at FPL IQ, we don't usually share like our own teams. We talk about the process. We come up with plans and styles, and hopefully people can learn their own way to play the game, and we analyze certain matches and player on player, and hopefully the way that we look at it, people can sort of take that or use it to expand their own game, right? But I've just had a little peek at Lucian's team, which I haven't for a long time, and there's a 14-point Tarkowski on the bench. You kept that one. You kept that one hidden.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't come on, so what's the point, right? He didn't come on. I mean, at the start of the season, right, everyone was going on about the whole Pickford-Turner rotation, and I came up with the whole schedule of the exact same rotation, but with Tarkowski and Kabore. Tarkowski and Aurier. So I managed to get Aurier's 10-pointer at home against Luton, but I couldn't get this because Tarkowski was not part of the rotation. He was meant to be benched this game week away to Brentford. So, I mean, yeah, points are points, but if I had never meant to play him in the first place, then does that count?
No. You played Kabore at home to your own Wolves team, so and Kabore did get an assist, right? Because
he got a return.
But
that doesn't count as an assist. It's an illegal assist. That penalty should not even have stood.
That's the example of why I'm happy my team's not in the Premier League, because I don't have that torn feeling of going against my own team or anything. But yeah, it's obviously we don't look at the results, we look at the decision, and the decision to bench Tarkowski away to Brentford is not like, no one sat here thinking, hey guys, 14-pointer for Tarkowski next week. Let's get it. obviously. But I just thought I'd have a peek, and I thought, ooh, kick. So what are we going to do today? Tien and I have been frantically deleting parts of our documents because today has been an absolute nightmare of what is going on with what's going on with the world of FPL. There are so many flags. It looks like it's a UN meeting because most of our teams have got 3 minimum flags going on. So we have talked about wildcard timings before, so Tien will give us a bit of an overview again, and I've got a really good graphic from Radar FPL from their Twitter account under the radar, with pros and cons for wildcarding game week 7, 8, 9, 10. Is it 8, 9, 10? Let me check.
Yep.
Yeah, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's on the screen now. I'll do it in a minute. So we'll do a general overview of the pros and cons of wildcarding between those times, because we feel here most people are going to wildcard between game week 7 and 10. 7 now has been heightened up because of the flags. So we'll have a look at a draft that I've put together, because I personally have 4 flags. But I've also got players that I don't want to play and players that might not play, like Pedro. So do I go a week early? What's the pros and cons on that? And then we're going to be discussing an idea that we've had about Haaland and no Haaland, because there are merits to it, and it's one that I think captaincy comes into it, but we'll talk about that later. Then we've got key matchups of Spurs against Liverpool, Newcastle, Burnley, and Villa against Brighton. So Spurs against Liverpool, I think that's going to be an absolute thriller. And we're looking at these two teams for our FPL assets. Newcastle coming off the back of that 8-0 win, and they're now under the spotlight with wildcards coming up. And then Villa Brighton, because it kind of feels like it's changing of the guard. A lot of people might go from Brighton players to Villa players as that fixture swing is complete. So it's kind of like might tug on some heartstrings if Brighton do well there, to think, am I going to sell these guys for these guys who they've just beaten? That's something we'll talk about later. Then we're going to review our 4-week game week player picks from game weeks 2 to 5 and 3 to 6, with Mira being the judge on that. She'll have the final say if it was a success or a failure. And then we'll do this week's 4-game week player pick with Tien defender, Ryan, who's not here, as midfielder, me as a forward, Lucian as a wildcard, so you can choose anyone. And we finish off with captaincy, which does actually have a bit of a talking point for a change. It's not just Haaland, goodbye, see you later. So a lot to take in on the show. And I think then we'll just start with Tien, and you're going to give us a lowdown on the general game week overview, wildcard times, okay?
Yeah, so we've already touched on the wildcard windows a couple of episodes ago, I think, and most of what we said then still apply. So most people will still be wildcarding during the sort of game week 8 to 10 window. But looks like some people have already activated wildcard this game week, and I think there are a lot of people that are thinking about. So I'll touch briefly on the pros and cons of each, and the graphic on the screen is a very good summary of that. So that's from FPL Under the Radar on Twitter. You should check them out and look at the graphic a little bit more carefully. Now I'm gonna talk about game week 7, wildcard game week 7 last, because that's when Rob will show what he's come up with, and then we can discuss about that one. But in terms of game week 8 to 10, so game week 8, the pros would be, in my opinion, is mainly to clear out all the losing assets that you've got for this double game week. And there are clear fixture swings for quite a few important teams. So Arsenal, City and Brighton fixtures are getting worse from next week, and Spurs and Villa in particular are getting much better. So they start their really nice fixture run from next game week. And then Liverpool, while it's maybe a week earlier, but a lot of the wildcarders will probably have Salah in just for 1 week of before the good fixture run as well. The cons of wildcard in game week 8 is that it's 1 week before the international break. So obviously, that international breaks will bring injuries and other things that will mean that we no longer have the wildcard to react to the news. And if you don't plan it carefully, Arsenal and Brighton assets, if you sell them all, you might need to think about how you can get them back from game week 10, because that's when their fixtures swing the other way. And the other thing is that there's going to be obviously price changes between now and the deadline, even though it's only 2 more days. But if a lot of people are doing transfers in the next couple of days, delaying the wildcard to game week 8 and it's going to apply to game week 9 and 10 as well. You're going to miss out on some of the price changes. Is it for you, game week 8? I think it's definitely for a lot of people. Especially if you have very little coverage of Spurs, Newcastle, Liverpool, and Villa assets. So if you don't have a lot of their players in your team now, I think a wildcard 8 is a perfect opportunity to get them in. Moving on to wildcard in game week 9, the pros is that it's during the international break, so you've got more time to tinker with your draft. Could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. But I think more importantly, it can react to any international break injuries and news. So you got up to the deadline to tinker with your team, and it's certainly a better time to jump on to Salah and other Liverpool assets at that time. And you've got one more week of information. Any more information is always a good thing. The cons of game week 9 wildcard is I don't think it's going to be too dissimilar to game week 8. And as I said, if you don't have like Spurs and Villa players in your team, you've already missed out on their really good, especially Spurs. Like they play Luton in game week 8. So if you don't have Spurs players and you already miss out on a really good fixture, it might be a little bit late to get onto Newcastle. If you don't have any, then it's probably a bit late. And then it might be a bit late to get off Arsenal and Brighton as well, because then it's just like one more week before you want them back on. So once again, there's some differences there between game week 8 and 9, and the price changes that I talked about earlier. You may miss out on a few price rises, especially if like Spurs asset and Villa assets they're doing well. Then of course they're going to rise a lot. Is it for you? Well, of course. Once again, it depends on the team. If you're well set up for game week 8 with free transfers already, for example, if you've got like Son and Madison and Diaby, and Salah, especially if you've got Salah already, then that's perfectly good time to wildcard as well. And if you are worried about international break injuries, if that's your major concern, then game week 9 wildcard is the perfect time to do it. Moving on to game week 10, the pros is that you will be setting up for a new template with Arsenal and Brighton back on the menu, while a lot of people will have offloaded during the game week between now and game week 9. And it might be a good time to jump on West Ham asset as well, because the fixtures are getting really nice from game week 10, and it's a good time to jump off Newcastle assets. So a lot of people might triple up Newcastle, for example, and you could do that with free transfers, and by game week 10 you can start offloading a lot of them. You could, and we'll touch on this a little bit later as well, you could have fun going without Haaland for a couple of game weeks, and then game week 10 wildcard, he can get straight back onto him. So the risk is there, but of course it's we minimize, because in your wildcard he can get him straight back. The international Break injuries have gone, so you don't have to worry too much about that. And once again, you got one more week of information. The cons of game week 10 wildcard is you will have missed out on Spurs and Newcastle returns, unless, as I said, if you were well set up with their players using your free transfers, and you will probably have to pay a lot more for certain assets as well. So is it for you? Once again, if you was very well set up for game week 8 and 9, for example, if you're not getting any Luton players, if you already offload a lot of Chelsea players, you got only a couple of Arsenal and United players and City players, then delaying it to game week 10 makes a lot of sense. So yeah, that's a very quick summary of the wildcard between game week 8 and 10.
Yeah, I think what we always say, play it your own way. It's always team dependent. Like you said, if you've got certain players in certain teams, if you're already sat there with Maddison and Son and Salah, then you probably can wildcard later, right? Lucian, you still have Salah?
Yeah, man, he's never left.
He's
He's
never
been there since
left.
game week
He's
1 alongside
still
Haaland.
So I'm we're going to talk about game week 7 specifically now, because we've talked about the other game weeks, and it's one where we're going to be looking as well at no Haaland. But I just wanted to go around and just see. So, Lucian, I'll start with you. Are you thinking of wildcarding? Do you have a plan of a game week to target?
Well, you see, the thing is, my play style makes me a perennial hit taker. So I'm not afraid of taking -4s, especially if I see opportunity. And the nice thing about these couple of game weeks is that there's so much opportunity. Luton aside, you can target Luton, and game weeks 8 and 9 can actually give you a lot of opportunity to dead end into certain teams. So for myself, I feel that the one team that has gotten away from me is Arsenal, because I let go of Arsenal assets really, really early in the season. And so I am looking at timing the purchase of Arsenal midfielders, and that would leave me with a game week, with a window of either game week 9 or game week 10, right after the City Arsenal game. So it just comes down to what Tian said, right? Do you want that 1 week of information in terms of who does well for the players you want, or do you want to jump on straight away, assuming that you know everything? So, I mean, I'm an eye test guy, and the eye test, never assumes that you know everything. So, for me, it's either 9 or 10. But I'm really hovering my strategy around 3 Arsenal players moving forward. That's about it.
Yeah, because I think the earlier your wildcard, so it feels like 7 and 8 can be a lot more different than 10, because I think a lot of people still have Arsenal and Brighton, and if you leave it that late, you're probably going to hold the Arsenal and Brighton until then, or you're going to use free transfers to take them in and out, and then it's going to be like, so this is another positive, that when we talk about wildcard 7, you're getting they've got Bournemouth, but if Saka's a doubt and you don't want to have that on you, then you go in early on that. And Brighton as well, they've got Villa plus difficult fixtures. You're getting out that 1 week early, and you're getting in the likes of Newcastle, who've got Burnley. That's if Botman's knee's okay, Dan Burn feels well again. Is it Wilson's groin and Isaac's big toe? I don't know what's happening at Newcastle, but they're having a bit of a nightmare at the minute. Don't believe Eddie Howe, right? I think that's the key takeaway of that. They'll probably there'll be a video of them all doing like short sprints like an hour before kickoff, and it's just like confidential written on it because he just didn't want to play him in the League Cup. Tien, when are you thinking of popping your wild card?
I think I'll do it right after the deadline, because
The game week 8.
Because it's again week 8. So I kind of made up my mind the moment I brought in Morris, because that was the key. That was the key for me. Because before game week 6, I was deciding whether, if I didn't go Morris, then I will set up my team in a way that I could delay to game week 10. But yeah, the decision to get Morris in, that was set for me. So yeah, I think if nothing changes and nothing crazy happening this weekend, then I will pop it.
But yeah,
Early
your
next week.
game week 8, because we're Luton
Yep.
boys for life. I've got the goalkeeper as well, so
For life until
Until
Saturday.
game week 8. Until I immediately take him out of my team after the double game week is finished. Yeah, correct.
Yep.
For 1 week, that's it. Mira, what are you thinking of going? Have you
Oh my
planned
God.
it? You've already played it right now. Last week,
No.
you've already played it.
No.
Game week 1, game week 2.
Where shall I start? Jeez, I started off the day looking at my team with very few injuries in my team. I think that was the thing that sort of got me thinking about wildcard a little bit more. So my original plan was to wildcard during the international break. So after game week 8, I would, use that sort of period to tinker with my team and just focus on, who I wanted to bring for the fixture swing that Liverpool have, especially, but also there's a couple of other teams that have good fixture swings after game week 9 anyway, like your Villas, and although like there's a couple of teams where you could go a little bit early, right? So that was my original thinking, that I would go during the international break and then plan to just do a big overhaul of my team. That was the plan. But yeah, I started to last game week. I started to feel like I started to live a little with how I was playing FPL as well. So if you caught me on having my sort of off the cuff chats that I do on Spaces and sort of upload onto you as well, I went from looking at data and sort of doing, I guess, focusing a little bit more on data because my decision making process was not going well. So although I planned to do my wildcard in the international break, so after game week 8, I started to just focus on the picks that I could make that would give me the most points going into game week 6. And so I went with Wilson and I brought in Trippier as well with my 2 free transfers. Now, looking at my team today, as you mentioned, Wilson has got some injury of some sorts, whether it's his groin or hamstring or whatever it is. I was just like, what the hell is going on? So that's now sort of dampened my plans a little bit with going into wildcard after 8 for aiming for game week 9. I'm now seriously considering going in 8. But I have to admit, the thought did cross my mind about what if I went in 7? Like, what would actually happen if I went in 7? What is the key differences between 7 and 8? I could sort of maximize on some of the opportunities for game week 8 and then sort of, I guess, like, I've been trying not to bank too many transfers in as well. So I feel like if I go now, I would be doing that to some extent, banking a couple of transfers in right up to like game week 10 or something like that. Because Brighton, their fixtures turn from game week 10 onwards as well. So I think that's where it becomes a bit tricky. So if I leave it a little bit later, I can probably get a good sort of team together that I'd be happy with and a bit more content with. If I go now, it's mostly because my team is injury prone at the moment and I need to consider it from a practicality perspective. But like Lucian said, I'm not averse to taking hits either. I've only taken 1 hit so far this season. I think compared to like what I did in my first season. My first season, I took something like 30 hits. I'm not even kidding. Like up to 30 hits or so.
First 10 years
insane.
of my life.
I had no idea what I was doing. Last season, I think I only took about 8 hits in the whole season. So I'm not averse to taking hits. But I feel like there's, in terms of the potential to whip up a really great team in game week 7 and game week 8, they're not too far off. There's a couple of compromises that you would make and a couple of transfers that you would probably bank in next sort of game weeks afterwards, but it's not too bad either. So at the moment, I'm kind of on the fence. I'm leaning more towards game week 8 now, which isn't ideal. I'm kind of going against my original sort of plans. I'm not averse to trying it out for game week 7 as well. I think it's going to come down to the pressers this week and what we hear about. Look, I've got Wilson in my team, so I transferred in Wilson. And I was counting on, holding him up till, game week 7, just because they're playing Burnley, right? So having Trippier and Wilson team was a good shout. I've already got a couple of points already from game week 6. So I'm not sort of too sad about losing Wilson if I need to. I'm I'm not drawn to the double game weekers, I have to admit. Like, you guys are brave. I'm not sure how I feel about that just yet. I'm not inspired. I'm just not feeling inspired.
Wait till you hear who my captain is.
Oh God.
But that's a great segue because we are going to go into game week 7, and you're exactly right. So a draft that I shared in our chat earlier, and it's looking at what a game week 8 draft, what I could have gone with in game week 8, slight changes of game week 7, and what it'll look like going in early. Just as a side note, talking about flags, and I did post this on Twitter earlier, just be wary about the flags and be wary about team news. Like, do you know how many players are flagged for Newcastle right now? Total. Do you know how many?
7?
Yeah, 6 or 7. Yeah.
10.
6 or 7.
Lucian's got it. 10 flags. Dubravka, Botman, Burn, Kraft, A. Murphy, Bruno Grimaresh, Barnes, Willock, Isaac, and Wilson. All flagged. You can't trust anything Eddie Howe says, right? Maddison, news has come out that he's been training and they're just sort of keeping an eye on it. And that's not a game you want to rest him. So if they're going to push him, it's against Liverpool. It's a big, they've got top 4 hopes. If it was against, Luton at home, then there might have been a more of a chance of resting him. But this is a game where they might give him pain meds and rest him in the future if he needs it, right? Chilwell looks out. Chilwell looks like it's his hamstring, which could be weeks and weeks, which is a real shame because I really thought he was going to play this weekend against Fulham, and that would have been great. Which leaves Saka as a bit more of a question mark. So in terms of Newcastle, I wouldn't feel it's that serious. Maddison has trained. Chilwell probably out. Saka, I don't know. So if you are looking at those 4 players, and the likes of Wilson as well, any Newcastle player or any player with a flag, just don't be too worried about it, I guess, but also don't put everything on the press conferences because you're just going to hear things like, oh, we'll see how it is, or oh, we'll give him a run before the game, or oh, it's touch and go, and
late test.
Test. He trained earlier, but he's got an assessment. Or just I just tried to make a bingo list of what you're going to hear in the press conferences tomorrow, because you're going to hear it. We'll see how he is.
It's a good reminder, though.
See how he is.
Such a good reminder, right? Because like people like me who are, a couple of seasons in, and we, especially sort of being this side of the world as well, where like the deadline was 5 o'clock in the morning, or what they have been leading up to more recently. It's so difficult to keep track of what is going on, and so I'm not the type of person that will wake up 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, and try and look up what is going on and what's being said, and then interpret that, right? You've got to almost put a translator in between what the hell these managers are saying, and so you can interpret it the right way and make the best call, right? It's such a challenge every single week. Yeah, I think you're right about the Saka pick though, like the Saka sort of injury, because they are playing Bournemouth, and so is it likely that he'll just get benched, against Bournemouth and come on a bit later or something like that because it's a slightly easier fixture for them?
Yeah, which is what I thought, and a lot of people. So I already I had more flags because I had Jackson and I took him out for Morris. So it's not like I've got 4 flags. I've got a free transfer. I can use my subs. I've already used my transfer on another flag. But that was the thinking, but a lot of people with a free transfer, they feel all right with Maddison, they can feel all right with the Newcastle guys, but they're probably looking at Saka to Son, which makes me then think of a wild card. So I'll just go through a draft that I've got, and it would be very similar to game week 8, but it has money in the bank and future transfers as well. So Areola, Turner as the 2 goalkeepers. West Ham are going to have a decent run, and goalkeepers are goalkeepers. I don't think any of us have a particular love for the position. Just get some save points, do what you do. Next. Cheap starter, save points, thank you. Double Newcastle with Botman and Burn. This is because this is a Salah and Haaland draft. I was talking to TM before the stream started, and it feels like the wild card is going to be people bringing Salah in to have Haaland and Salah, or no Haaland. It feels like Salah is the key question to this up and coming wild card. I can't think of anyone really who's going to wild card if you don't want Salah, unless you really sat there with like eight flags and you want to change things up, but could be wrong. But yeah, Botman and Burn. Kabori's in there, but Cash and Anderson are on the bench, so obviously they would come in as the more regular third defender. So it would be Cash or Anderson starting most weeks. Salah, Diaby, Gordon is in there as an early placeholder. So going game week 7 means that we can go for Newcastle now with one player, because Barnes looks like he could. Like, Barnes is a truthful injury. That doesn't seem like it's Eddie Howe lying and we're going to see Barnes playing this weekend, right? It looks like Barnes has got an injury for weeks to months, right? So going early has given you a chance of potentially a more differential with the likes of Gordon, but that's a placeholder for game week 10 Matoma. So I completely agree what you were saying earlier, Mira, about wildcarding. You don't want to have too many penciled in transfers, which is why when we talked about maybe having a West Ham player in there, I felt like that had to go out earlier. But if I had Gordon for the next 3, 4, 5 game weeks, I'm happy with it. I'm penciling in a transfer 4 weeks away, not next week. Madison and Son, so it's a week early. So the issue that we have with this is you're going for the beautiful Spurs pair that are in demand right now a week early against Liverpool. When we talk about the Liverpool matchup, I still see that as a positive because I think it's going to be a goal fest, right? You know, Liverpool aren't great defensively, and Big Ange, he showed us when they played Newcastle, he will not change for anyone. He will play his football attacking against any team. And then Haaland up front with Morris. Morris would be my one penciled in transfer next week for Watkins. Now, the good thing about this that I like about this draft is I can get any striker because it's like every striker is 7.9 million and less. So I can go Gordon to Matoma in a few game weeks, or any under 7 million midfielder, and Morris can go to like any other secondary striker. So if next week I don't fancy Watkins because I've already got Diaby for that run of fixtures, that could be a Darwin as a differential, or I'll go to a Wilson or an Isak, or if one of them's injured or not injured or whatever. So the idea about this going a bit earlier is you've got the Spurs boys and the Liverpool boys against each other, but you're not backing their defenders, which you don't think you would really anyway in that kind of fixture. But the positive for me is you're getting rid of some of the flags, despite this having 3 flags, but I just don't trust the Newcastle one. But you've got a better bench, right? A lot of us, so in my situation now, I could be having all sorts of players come on the pitch that I don't want. If one of those Newcastle defenders or both are, I've got Cash and Anderson coming on, which isn't the worst. But the issue with this, and this is going to be the next key talking point, is and it was put in the chat by is the fact that if you were looking to go no Haaland, this is just 1 week too early because he's got Wolves, and that if you were going to wildcard and you were going to go without Haaland anyway, which we're going to discuss now about the pros and cons because we'll shoot over to Tien to start us off about that, is it's a risk as it is, and to do it a week early when he's got Wolves feels even worse. It makes me sick to think of him. Like, on this run of fixtures, if you don't have Haaland till like game week 15, something like that, you're going to suck it up against, I think it's game week 11 against Bournemouth. But if you have to also do it against Wolves, and if he smashes it against Wolves and you've gone 1 week early, you're rushing to get
season over.
Season over. You're taking hits to get him back in. It's awful. So, I am leaning towards a game week 7 draft because my game week 8 draft, and maybe you guys will agree or disagree. Like, would you make any major changes? Like, obviously your draft would be a little bit different to what I've put together here. But looking at this team, like, if you want Salah and Haaland, like I can't have Trippier. I'd have to sacrifice another midfielder. Or I've thought as well about going 4-5-1. So just have Haaland and have a fourth defender instead, which could be a Trippier because he's 6.5.
6 now, I think.
6x6 now,
So
yeah.
I always find that forwards are the most overpriced in the game, in terms of the value, apart from like Haaland, right? So going 4-5-1 and just having Morris sat on my bench as the 90th minute sub in case it's the week Haaland gets dropped, and just playing 4-5-1 with a better midfielder and a better defender. But if you were to wildcard in game week 8 and you were to have Salah and Haaland, is there anything different for you between game week 7 and game week 8? Because Gordon could be Gordon could still be Matoma. Gordon could be 7 million or less. Any midfielder from game week 8. Like, what would... So, Lucian, start with you. I'll go down in a square. Would you wildcard, like, between 7 and 8? Do you think there's a big difference? Because a lot of people are looking right now and thinking, do I wait 1 more week or 2 more weeks, or I've got so many flags, could I go a week early? Is there a big difference?
Yeah, it's about perception, isn't it? Because as much as we don't like to admit it, we are kind of swayed by trying to attack the template, right? And the template, or at least what the content creators are saying right now, is that they would like to wildcard in game week 8 itself. So, or at least somewhere between 8 to 10. So as it is, wildcarding in 7 is already somewhat attacking the existing template. So yes, going without Haaland against Wolves is definitely extremely risky. So I would say that wildcarding in 7 makes Haaland compulsory. I'd actually say that wildcarding in 8 allows you to not have Haaland for a short moment. So it's difficult to say, right? Because once again, right, we are swayed by what we feel content creators will say. And if the content creators go, oh yeah, Haaland's got difficult fixtures against Arsenal, yada yada yada, and then they still own Haaland at the end of the day when they wildcard in game week 8, like, where's your dignity, people? So, I think that's the matter of fact, right? Rob, my first sentence to you when we started our very first video together was not that Mbomo would be the first name on my team sheet. It was that Haaland, as much as we hate not having Salah, eventually everyone will talk about trying to fit Haaland and Salah in their drafts. It happened in preseason, and it's going to happen again in game week 8, because that's pretty much the theme of wildcarding in game week 8, where those people who do not have Salah have seen how consistent he is, and they are just trying to shoehorn Salah in alongside Saka and Madison and whoever else that is part of the template, the elite 13 to 15 players. And the fact that we have multiple attacking fullbacks priced less than 5 million, such as Cash and Udogi and now Botman, value for money, just cements that very perception. So wildcarding in 7 either attacks it by attempting to go for it early, or just ignoring every pick in game week 8, basically. So you either go big at the back and just go completely against the grain, or you just hop onto that cheap at the back, expensive in midfield sort of draft moving forward. Because that's how all the content creators started, right? At the beginning of the season, they went extremely cheap in midfield because there was so much value in that 6.5 million range, and people were refusing to let go of Bruno Fernandes and Marcus Rashford. I would argue that people would still refuse to let go of Bruno Fernandes and Marcus Rashford right now.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
actually,
that's where we are.
Yeah.
I sold him in game week 2, right, for Diaby.
Yeah,
Chen,
can I just jump in?
yeah.
And yeah, no, I think there's not gonna be It's so if you think about what Lucian just said, right? There's just 2 ways to attack the template. One is to go really rogue, like you just go very differential, and then you attack it basically every single week. The other way, which is more my preferred way, which sort of more fit my playing style than anything else, is to get ahead of the template. And the biggest pros of wildcarding now is doing exactly that. So you'll be picking a lot of the players that will be in the wildcard game
next week.
Next week wildcard, right? But it just got 1 week early, and so you could get the points, and then you could also get the price rises before everyone else. And yeah, I think that your draft here won't be too dissimilar to a wildcard 8 game week. Because the main key players that we talked about, Spurs, Villa, Newcastle, and Liverpool, they're all there. There's a couple of cons as well that we need to talk about. So you got to make. So there's a few dilemmas for people wildcarding now. One is to decide whether they go heavy on Luton or not, and there's got to be a divisive opinion on this. So here you go with Kabore and Morris. A lot of people will probably not having Morris because they might already have like an Alvarez, for example, which it will be very difficult for them to sell before Wolves, right? So they will have to keep Alvarez. And as Lucien said, people will probably have Bruno Fernandes and Rashford, and they're playing Crystal Palace at home. Extremely difficult to let go of them this game week, right? No matter how you think about United, I mean, those are big players. They are big moment players. Like Bruno, like look at that wonder strike. They can do that in any game week, right? So it's and even that their ownership is very high, it's gonna hurt you a lot if you get off you get off them and your Spurs asset don't return, for example, because you get onto them maybe slightly early. Like, yes, everyone else is going to jump on them next week and everyone going to get the same point as you. You don't get the points now, but then you miss out on the points of the United assets, of the Man City asset that you are letting go. Right? So I'm currently triple up on Man City. I can't sell any of them before Wolves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's a dilemma that people have to make. There's some tough decision that people have to make. And you mentioned a very important point earlier about all the flags. Are they real flags? Are they real injuries, or are they not? And there's no way we find out. Like, the press conference may tell us something, but probably not everything. And we only know after the deadline, because whether they play or not will tell us the true story, whether they're actually injured or not. So then the game week 8 wildcard, we have that extra information that will sometimes is very important as well. So that's just obviously it's pros and cons like everything else. You got to make that decision yourself.
It's just, I think it's a big game changer to go a game week 7 for one key reason is the Haaland, which we'll go around and just just one part. So Mira, would your game week 8 draft look too dissimilar to this, or quite similar, do you think?
Actually, it's quite similar. I've got my game week draft just up in front of me as well. I was just going to do a bit of a compare and contrast. So I do have, say, Areola in goal. I started to think about, so I ditch Trippier as well. So instead of a double up on Botman, I've got, I decided to keep Walker. Just because I'm feeling good about Walker at the moment. I sort of brought him in from game week 1 and great wonders at the moment. But look, in my defense, I've got Walker, Fabian Schär, Ash or Dean. I'm not sure there. I've got Estupinian in there as well, and I've got Kabore. Now, the reason why I'm kind of like, and that would be a 7/8, so it gives me the option to kind of there's a couple of options there that could work, like if I go in 7 or 8. I'm leaning towards the 8. I have doubled up on the midfield, same as this draft as well, so Maddison and Son there. I also think about bringing in Mitoma and sort of doubling down a little bit on the possibility that Sheffield will probably concede 20 goals again against, West Ham. And so I've brought in Bowen, there. So this is where I start to sort of bank in a couple of those transfers for later on. I actually brought in Matoma because it seems like Matoma is performing like despite sort of the fixture as well. So I'm a bit on the fence on that one. If I don't go Matoma, I think you've got, Diaby there. So I'd probably lean towards Diaby or Gordon. Actually, I was thinking about Villa and potentially bringing in even a Douglas Luiz, because it seems like Luiz is on penalties as well. So that could be the budget kind of, punt pick to bring in their midfield if you're not wanting to go Gordon, because I think someone mentioned it in the chat earlier as well, Colm, who mentioned something about like Gordon being on 4 yellow cards at the moment as well. So that is something that crossed my mind, because I was leaning towards going with Gordon just because he's just priced in a really good sweet spot there. But so is Douglas Luiz. He's like 5.4 at the moment. Could be a good pick with the fixture run that they have as well. But up front, like I was thinking, if I was to go in game week 8, I'm actually playing Darwin alongside Haaland and Ferguson. That could be my Liverpool bias ever so slightly there as well, but that is also with the intent. I don't have Salah in the team at the moment, but I could go Son to Salah. I've got 4.4 mil in the bank at the moment with that draft, and I could go Son to Salah in game week 9, basically. So that is the first transfer that I would probably bank. I'd probably be okay with the rest of the other players that I've got there for game week 9, then going into potentially rolling in game week 9 into 10 as well, going into game week 10 with 2 free transfers, or 11 even with 2 free transfers. So just because I've got the cover for Brighton as well as, I think Bowen would be the only one. I think like where West Ham, a quick look. I think West Ham play Newcastle in 8. So that's and then Villa. So that could be a slightly sort of intermediate kind of fixture. But after that, there's a really great fixture run coming in. So it's a possibility that I could bench because I'm playing, at the back. I've got Walker, Fabian Schär, Cash, and Stupinian as well. So I've got 4 potentially good combination there that I could play in the back line as well. So that's currently what I'm thinking. So it's not too dissimilar from what you have. Obviously, I'm thinking about the prospect of playing 3-4-3 as well, with Douglas Luiz in there. So it just depends, like even with the Darwin pick, that could easily be a Watkins as well. So because again, we can't sort of ignore Watkins. I think like he's going to probably start to play well and get those returns as well. So I'm not sure. So the Douglas Luiz, Watkins, Darwin sort of combination, even Bowen, like Bowen could be WP as well. So yeah, there's a couple of combination of things that, we could do. But Rob, like you said earlier, it's so difficult to fit in Trippier in this as well.
If you've got
So as
and
much as I'd
Haaland
want
and the
to,
Spurs boys.
Exactly. So the thought did cross my mind of ditching Haaland. So if I wildcard in 8, I would ditch Haaland at that point and have double up on Maddison, Son, and Salah. The intent of dropping probably Son, depending on how things go, him to be my cash cow to bring Haaland back in by, I think it was game week 10. I think
11 is Bournemouth.
11, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, they've got Arsenal, Brighton. Brighton will be okay. Arsenal could be like a 0-0 potentially, 1-1, something like that, a low scoring match. United, look, I'm really sorry. I don't know how many of you are United supporters,
TN.
but I just don't. I know TN is. I just don't see. I don't see that sort of. I actually
Don't bang on
see
another
that as a
7-0
difficult
though.
fixture. Yeah, well, exactly. And so, ideally, I'd probably be bringing back Haaland in week 10 because. But the problem is that, like, Tottenham's playing Palace, which isn't I feel like that could be an intermediate one as well. I don't think it's an easy
No, it's
fixture,
not,
but I don't
no.
think it's. I don't think it's a difficult one either. It's one of those in between. So going from and holding on to Madison for as long as possible would probably be the where I'd be leaning at the moment.
I've been triple Palace all season.
Oh wow, go you!
Johnson, Anderson, and Edsay. Yeah. So that brings on to the final part. This is why I think it could be season defining, because it's not just Haaland. So the first question is, if you go early now, game week 8, I think more people would potentially risk no Haaland because of that run of fixtures, with an idea to get him in. You can get him back in 2 moves. You can sell Salah or you can sell Son. You can get him back in 2 moves, no problem. It's also it's not just him. It's the others. So if you do decide to go early and no Haaland, it's a week too early, potentially. Any week's too early with Haaland. They can do it any time. But the problem that you're going to have is people are going to have the Brighton players. Estepinian's got 62.4% ownership. Matoma's got 42.9% ownership. Saka, yeah, he's got a flag. A lot of people are looking to wildcard him out to get the 2 Spurs guys in and Salah, because you can't have Son, Maddison, Saka, Salah, Haaland. Reasonably, right? So a lot of people are ditching Saka. He's got Bournemouth, and he also has 64.7% ownership. So you got to look at the numbers, and Haaland's bad enough as it is at 92.4%. You're going against... If you're not going to my belief is, if I was going to wildcard next week, and I'm not going to captain him in the next 10 game weeks, I'm only going to captain him twice, I'd consider selling him. If I could use that money. If I'm not going to captain him, right? But also bear in mind that if you go early this game week, you're not, and even if you hold Salah, you go in against some big players. Like a lot of us we talked at the start of the show about how we jumped up off the Saturday and fell all the way back on the Sunday, and that was Matoma. That was it. If you go early and you're sat there with Matoma or Estepinian, which a lot of people do have because their ownership's so high, if we get another assist from Estepinian and another goal from Matoma, you've gone a week early and you wildcards, unless your new players do it. It's a big decision. I think it's a lot bigger than people think, because they just think, oh, Haaland or no Haaland, but actually all your other players like Saka, Estepinian, Matoma, those players have huge ownerships. Even like Saliba, he's got Bournemouth away, but he's got 28.8% ownership. You know, that can do some damage as well. Rashford's got 30% ownership. Bruno's got 20% is not too bad, but 30% ownership. Rashford, a lot of people are looking to get him out on a wild card soon. From next game week. So if you are going to go early, even when you're not thinking about Haaland, all those other players are going to add up. So just be worried about that. So just before we go into the matchups then, so I could pull my wild card for tomorrow. Like, I could, especially if the press has come out and it's telling me that Saka is out and Chilwell is out, and I just don't fancy playing Edsay against Manchester United away. How are you on no Haaland or Haaland? Like, we're not sat here saying he's a bad pick. He's miles clear of a lot of people. I think for me personally, it comes down to captaincy. I already said that if I've got Salah and I've got Son, and then in a few game weeks I pick up Saka, bring him back in for the good run. I can't remember where I saw the post, but someone had put a list of like all the fixtures and all the captaincy choices. And apart from that Bournemouth game for Man City, which you could plan to bring him back by game week 11. If you wildcard in 7 and it takes 2 free transfers, you could bring him back for then if you wanted. But if you can hold off until game week 15 or even 16, when 16 is when they have Luton, right? Someone had pointed out that Liverpool, Spurs, or Arsenal had like, you know, a Sheffield United or a Luton as a fixture. So if you're not going to captain him, for me personally, if you're looking at it and say, well, his third choice there, his second choice there, his third choice there, his third choice there, his second choice there, why I could use that money else. I could have Trippier. And I don't have to have a Gordon. Gordon could be a Saka, or I can upgrade Gordon to any midfielder I want. So if I leave it till game week 8, I'm definitely more tempted to not have Haaland. And my captain this week is probably Morris because I just want to have a bit of fun. I'm not recommending it. I know you don't like. Teacher, you said Adebayo, whatever it was, and he wasn't even playing last game. Morris, it's a double game week. It's fun. I like it. No stat makes sense. The fixtures are there for him. I believe in your team, Lucian. It's your team that I believe in. I'm doing this in solidarity for you because he's against Wolves. It's all for you. I'm a Wolves fan this week, Lucian.
Oh dear Lord.
I'm joining the misery.
I'm joining in. I'm joining myself in the misery too of telling everyone to captain Haaland against Wolves.
No, don't say that.
You have to do it. It's Wolves. I mean, if Wolves were defensively sound or doing something better, I'd back you.
But just one goal. He can have one goal, and then I'll take it.
Tell the defenders that make mistakes week in, week out.
I'll
Even Jose Sa has been culpable of a few.
I did ask you earlier if you could tell me some positive, and you said that they could man mark Haaland, which gives Alvarez more of a chance to get some.
Yeah, of course, and that's what they did last season. We lost 3-0 because Haaland got the second goal, but we man marked him really hard, and it was. The problem with Wolves right now is that after we trail, we make really reckless decisions. That's the biggest issue. And Haaland basically scored, I think, like the second goal or something like that. But it was basically him shrugging off his marker and beating us. The only positive I can give you is that Morris could potentially outscore Haaland. I think you should be looking forward to that. You captain somebody because he's potentially going to get a higher score of the week.
Yeah, well,
so if
Haaland
Morris
has to
outscores
score,
Haaland,
right? Because the floor we talked about it earlier. If he plays twice, it's 4 points unless he gets booked. So Haaland basically has to get one goal or an assist to even it out. So that's just a separate plan. So, well, Lucian, we'll stick with you then. So you've got both now because you've had Salah all season. You got Haaland. Would you consider no Haaland, or is he just too clear? And even without captaincy, you just hold him because he gets points.
Manchester City have 18 green fixtures and 2 yellow ones all season. It's really as simple as that, and they've already done one with Newcastle, right? So beyond that, I mean, that's pretty much the captaincy metric. Captain Haaland unless he plays Arsenal or Newcastle. The problem for me with not owning Haaland is exactly as what everyone has put forth so far, using the money. If let's say you did not own Haaland, right, and you chose to own Salah instead, you'd still have too much money. and I mean, personally, I scrapped the idea of Bruno Fernandes and Rashford. So you're really essentially left with Son, Madison, Luis Diaz, Darwin, Watkins, Callum Wilson. There aren't many options left. I mean, last season, the argument at least wasn't moot because if you did not own Haaland, you could jump on Salah and Kane to match his potential. Kane would have been a shoo-in for game week 8 if he still played for Spurs. And now we're relying on Madison or Son as a captaincy potential against whoever it is in game week 8. That's really the biggest dilemma here. So yeah, I'd have to say Haaland and Salah, like no question about it.
Mira,
I'm with Lucian on this. So I captained Madison in when Spurs were playing Sheffield a couple of game weeks ago. I think it was game week 5. And look, I mean, just that one goal. I mean, it could have been a lot worse, right? Like Haaland could have got plenty match. But I was up for going against Haaland, and Tien will remember this really well from last season. I've captained Kane against Haaland, and it was a really good fixture as well. Again, it was sort of an informed risk for during a game week where it could have gone either way. I think like last season with that match, I can't remember who Haaland who City were playing, but got a hat trick And I think like
Oof.
Kane got oh yeah, something like that. Yeah, and Kane did get a goal and he got an assist as well, I think. But it just didn't match up at all. And so just the EO just hammered me last season. And despite that, I had a really good end to the season, so I can't I can't really complain. But I think just knowing what it could be like, this does not feel like the game week to go against Haaland, in my opinion, because it's Wolves. And I don't know how much we should take note of, the Carabao match, the cup this week, but didn't Wolves, sort of lose 3-2 to Ipswich as well. So yeah, I'm sorry, Lucian. I'm so sorry.
What team did they play? What defenders did they play? That's what I need to know.
Yeah, I get that. But that's an opportunity, right? That's an opportunity for a mid-table kind of, team like Wolves where they have moments of potential where they look really good. Defense, whether it's their defense or their midfield, right? Like Neto is amazing. Like he's been playing so well. But I just don't see this match going very well if you go against Haaland as well. So I think for me it's a no. I'd probably want to have Salah and Haaland. It's better to just have Haaland and not captain him and just still get those sort of like the points for owning him.
Jan, your big point was about this.
Yeah, I think it's very important to try not to be making decision based on emotions, right? And I've touched on that before. Like, yes, I've been burned by not captaining Haaland. I even went without Haaland for a few game weeks last season as well. And some game it worked really well, and then there was one game that it didn't work very well, and obviously up and down. But it doesn't mean that I'm scared to life and I can't do it again. I'm thinking of doing it again, right? And you got to think about, okay, what are the factors that you consider? So I did an analysis on Haaland sort of halfway through the season last season about Haaland, and he tends not to do so well against the traditional sort of top four team. So you talk about Arsenal, Liverpool, especially in away fixture. So that present an opportunity to go against him. So let's say next game week he's got Arsenal away, which is it's gonna be a hard fixture. Of course, you can argue that he can do well against any team in any game. Of course, that's true. But we kind of look at the probability, right? The probability of him holding against Arsenal away would be lower. And let's say Son playing Luton. So you've got to play the odds, you're gonna play the probability. And then game week 9, we got Salah playing Everton at home.
Bruno,
Everton at home. And
now,
then
just to jump in as you're going, so just so you talk about captaincy, right? So as we go through the weeks, because I've got it up on the screen, if you don't have Haaland, you can have a power 5 midfield, and by that I mean Son, Saka. You can have any team. You can have Liverpool, United, Spurs. So yeah, just so
So then basically the minimum window you can go is between game week 8 and 10. So 3 game weeks. You've got Son playing Luton. You've got either Son playing Fulham or Salah playing Everton, and then you've got Salah playing Nottingham Forest at home for those 3 fixtures when Haaland play Arsenal, Brighton, and Man United. And then of course you can get him back in game week 11 for the Bournemouth fixture, and then everything will be sweet again. And you're just hoping that you get lucky over those 3 game weeks. It's that kind of thing. Like you got to analyze that. Okay, what are the pros and cons? And of course Haaland can do well against those teams, and then you'll be hurt. But that's an opportunity there. And on the other hand is like you can think about like, okay, well there's a risk. Like going against Haaland is a risk. Even not captaining him is gonna be his EO is gonna be over 150% every single week, right? So going without him is a massive risk. Let's just admit that. But you could think about how do you mitigate those risks. So, for example, instead of owning Haaland, you can have, and I think Quentin mentioned that in the chat earlier as well. You can have double City attack, Foden, Alvarez. If you look at the way Man City plays, they score goals, right? Those three are very likely to be involved. So then it's kind of like minimize the risk by having some sort of coverage in Man City attacks in case they go big against in those fixtures as well. And I think the most important thing is you need to have a plan. Go back to him if it backfires. So game week 11, if you plan that you have 2 free transfers there, just a double switch between Salah and forward to Haaland back to a cheaper midfielder. I think that's pretty simple, even with the hit, because Haaland against Bournemouth at home, and you're going to captain him. The hit is going to pay it off, or very likely to be paid off straight away. So yeah, the opportunity is there, but of course, you could always argue the case that Haaland is by far the best player in FPL at the moment. He can return in any game, any fixture could be argued to be a green fixtures for Haaland. So if you are too scared and you can't live with the sort of extremely high risk and extremely volatile ranks because of what he can do, then just have him. And I think you can have a decent draft with Haaland, Salah, Son you can have, but probably not with Saka as well. So you might have to sacrifice Saka.
That's a sacrifice.
I think you can still fit in Madison, and then 6.5 midfielders or even 5.5 midfielders like James Ward-Prowse or whoever cheaper kind of midfielders, and you can have Alvarez up front as well because he's only 7 million, right? It's pretty cheap. So I think you can build a quite decent draft with all of those as well.
I like that.
Yeah.
That you're twisting my arm. I'm like making loads of notes on my post-it notes here as well.
Yeah.
I actually don't mind I quite like the idea of having like a Darwin, Alvarez, and Watkins up front, for example. That's
like
you could spread those funds,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
And just the points that you said about captaincy. So if you have Salah and Haaland, one of the midfielders have got to give. That's got to be Son or Saka, or two of the three must be Son or Saka or Bruno Rashford. You can only have one of those three. You can't have Salah, Haaland, Son, and Bruno and Saka. Like 2 of those 3 guys have got to go. If you don't have Haaland just for those 3 game weeks, the captaincy that you talk about is even more expanded, especially if you bring Saka back in, because so if you're doing it from game week 8, which is I think the most optimal time, Arsenal against City, you can have Son's got Luton, Bruno's got Brentford. I'll just use Bruno as the United player. But game week 9, Son's got Fulham, but United have Sheffield United in that game, whereas City has got Brighton at home, which shouldn't be that simple. And then game week 10, Salah has Nottingham Forest, but Saka has Sheffield United at home, whereas City go to United.
Yeah.
So
I think at the end of the day, my point is, don't just not do it because you're too scared. It's like, I'm too scared, I'm not going to think about it. Think about, weigh up the risk, weigh up the benefit. It's high risk, high reward kind of strategy. Have a time frame. I'm going to go for it. This is my exit strategy, and what are the benefits, and are they going to potentially outweigh the risk, and make that informed decision.
I still think it keeps going if you keep those players, because even when they've got Bournemouth at home, you've got Salah going to Luton and you've got Bruno away at Fulham.
It's going well, yes. Why not?
Game week 12, City go to Chelsea, but then
they can go all the way to 15. Yeah.
Saka has Burnley, Bruno has Luton. So if you like you said, like Mira's saying, like you could have a front 3 of Darwin, Watkins, and Wilson or something like that, and you use the money. It's if you think it's going to make it up, but the fear is the big one. Yeah.
Can I make one final very quick point?
Yeah, and then we'll go to
The
matchups.
thing about EO, right? And sometimes EO is very hard to explain. But think about the simplest ways to think about. If Haaland is about 150% EO every single week, then think about that every team around you will have 1.5 Haaland. Okay? So you either have one Haaland and you don't captain him, then you only lose out on that half Haaland point. Or if you don't have him at all, then that's 1.5 Haaland times the number of points that he's going to score. And look around your team, the players that going without Haaland enable you to get. Are they going to be enough to make up for that shortfall of points? And of course, playing Bournemouth at home, Haaland's going to be 200% or near 200%. So that's going to be 2 Haaland in every team around you. So not having Haaland for that game is extremely risky. But once again, it's think about what else do you have and can you potentially balance that or even outscore that.
So we said we called this like 2 weeks ago that game week 8 was going to be the real split where it's not necessarily auto captain Haaland every week and potentially time to bring them both in or get rid of Haaland. So I've been looking forward to game week 8. It's just that now with all of this injury news and flags, it's sort of potentially brought plans forward for some people. So let's go into the matchups then. Lucian, we're going to cover Spurs Liverpool first. I'm really excited about this game. I really want to watch it. What's your thought on this matchup then? Game week.
Well, bro, that's how we roll, right? I mean, the purpose of us looking at Spurs Liverpool is really because we own Madison and potentially Salah at the same time. So it's always about like what we look forward to rather than who we intend to buy. Because I mean, people would have told you weeks ago, right, that you must own Madison, and it just comes down to whether you want to own Salah. Now, the thing about matches between two sides that are part of the traditional Big Six is that these moments are usually what decide a game. So we've had a few games now between the traditional top 6, and I can go from most recent to oldest, and you'll see a pattern. Let's just put it that way. Spurs Arsenal, the London derby, were basically characterized by bad mistakes from both sides. There was no tactical advantage that both sides had. Man United against Arsenal 2 weeks before that basically was 1-1 until the referee disallowed the Man United goal and allowed one Arsenal one to go through it from a very, very marginal offside, right? 2 weeks before that, Spurs 2-0 Man United. It's the same thing. These teams do not allow their plan A to come forward. Even going back to game week 1 when Chelsea played Liverpool, right? Tactically, everything goes out the window, and you're looking for players who will capitalize on big moments, who will come forth and basically, go with that cliche of take the game by the scruff of the neck. Because right now, at least in terms of mentality and pattern, first things first, we know that Liverpool are a team that gains ascendancies in the second half. They usually start really, really poorly no matter who they play against. Then somehow they come up with some sort of attacking return in the second half. So will they adjust? So that also assumes that Spurs will take the lead in the first half. Assuming Madison plays, you guys need to answer first and foremost, need to weigh in on who from Spurs will help establish that lead, assuming Madison plays. Because it can potentially come from set pieces, because when you are playing at home to Spurs, right, the home team usually gets the majority of set piece decisions from fouls, from corners, from just the crowd chiming them on. And secondly, in the second half, how will Liverpool adjust to hit Spurs in their weak spots? I think we shall begin our discussion right there.
Yeah, I think Sarr is. I think the midfield is going to be the big one here. I've been pretty critical about Liverpool's defensive centre, but I'm massively excited about this game. Like I said weeks and weeks ago, and everyone's loving Big Angie's style of football, and we said before the Arsenal game this was going to be the big one to show, like, is he going to change when he plays against a big team, especially away from home? No. he's not changing for anyone. These are two teams that have no mercy in attack, but are risky in defense. And on paper, you'd have this as like a 4-4, but sod's law, it's going to be 0-0 because that's what happens in football, right? Just like we're expecting City to beat Wolves 3-0, and it's going to be like a 1-0 Wolves win, and everyone's going to be like, oh, what's going on? But that was the big test there, and against Arsenal, and they didn't bow to anyone. Ryan posted in our chat, it just feels like every game for Liverpool right now finishes 3-1. So
Yeah.
it's just this is another reason why if I go early, I'm not getting Spurs defenders, I'm not getting Liverpool defenders, and I see both of these teams scoring goals. If Maddison plays, of course, is pivotal, but I just think it's in that midfield where it's the Spurs midfield that's going to win or lose the game, because the triangle movements that they do, and I saw this especially against Bournemouth, because Bournemouth, I can't remember the manager's name, but it was what he did at Rayo Vallecano, right? When he's a very high pressing player. And we talked in preseason, Lucy, we talked about, I admire his style, but he doesn't necessarily have the players to do it. But Bournemouth, high pressing style, dogging at your feet all the time, right? So what was happening is for Maddison to make the triangles, he was going deeper, because what happens is, they say inverted fullbacks, but they're not. But Porro and Udogie come more central, and then they have these triangles, and that's why Sarr can get up to a higher triangle with the likes of Kulusevski and now Son down the middle, right? And I don't know how Liverpool's going to stop that. If Maddison... So Liverpool are historically like a gegenpress kind of, a pressing kind of team, right? But if Maddison's the one that drops, again, deeper towards his own area... I don't know who's going to pick him up. And then if Sarr makes the box-to-box run, I don't know who's going to stop him. I can't see which player is going to pick up. This is why it's going to be important as well to see if Gakpo or Darwin starts. Because if Gakpo goes in that false 9 role, he might be the one that can drop back to help. But if they go with like a spearhead of Darwin as the attack, because they want to push through the Spurs defense, that's going to change the game as well. So it really, when I see the team sheet, that's going to give me an even better idea of how they're going to tackle that. But look, McAllister without a 6, they can't stop him. I don't know how they're going to go about it. So Maddison is of course going to be key. Soboslai has been doing really well. McAllister is not a bad player, but I just don't feel him as a deep lying playmaker without a 6 next to him is going to stop the tenacity and the box-to-box engine and energy of Basuma and Sarr. And if Maddison is told to, because they're pressing too much, to go deeper to his own defense, who's going to press? And if that pulls them out, that's going to leave even bigger gaps. And if we have Trent, I don't think Trent's going to be fit for this weekend, but if, he's not going to be in that central place. So I think there's going to be goals. It's at home to Spurs as well. The mental improvement because of they beat Sheffield United so late, and then they did a really good performance against Arsenal. It's going to be in the midfield, and I just still think that Liverpool's got a soft centre. And look, like, I don't want to sound like all armchair philosophy, but the whole Son gets in behind idea. But this is literally a game where Son can get in behind because Liverpool will press and play a high line, and Spurs will get behind it. So I think it's going to be a really interesting game. Darwin as well will be if I don't wildcard this week, he's on an audition because it's between him and Watkins for next game week. And it's exactly, I feel like Darwin, but less so how I feel about Wilson at Newcastle. That if you give me minutes with that guy, he's in my team. He's only not because he can't promise me minutes, and I'm not paying 7.4 million for a player that is so on off. But I just feel it'll be a great game. Spurs will get it in the midfield. But if it's the Spurs that played against Arsenal, it'll be great. But if it's against Sheffield United, they were kind of lucky. But yeah, that's how I take it. I think it's going to be depending where Maddison goes, who's going to stop that steamroll engine of a midfield that Spurs have got right now because I can't see it. But equally, without ignoring Liverpool, Udogie against Salah. Salah is world class, and we saw what Saka just did. Was it goal and assist, right, against Spurs? Down the Spurs left-hand side, which is where Salah's going to be now. So if Saka can do it, Salah can do it. Again, this is just another reason why if I'm going to have those two Spurs boys and Salah next week, why wouldn't I have them in this game where I believe that they're going to score? Like, what am I missing out on? It's either I bring these boys in now a week early, or I play Etse against United away. Which, knowing my look at the minute, Etse is going to go and get a hat trick when I sell him because I've been bigging him up all season. But yeah, so Liverpool have just as much danger going forward because Spurs' defense is not great. They have errors. Romero can get another own goal and a red card before you know it. And I think if they play Gakpo, less, but if they play Darwin, I think it could be a goal fest. Yeah. Tien, what are your thoughts on this matchup?
I think for me it's going to be a key game for for the wildcard next week. It's an audition, but also like how they gonna for example, right? Son played the last 2 games as number 9, and it's 3 games actually, but and he did really well. Last game week, I got Brandon Johnson playing on the left, right? Which I think he was doing really well, but then he got injured, and Solomon came on. And I remember Solomon started the game week before against Sheffield United, and I don't think he was very good. So is that going to be the case? Like, is Son still going to play up front and Solomon playing on the left, or can Richarlison get back in and play up front and Son to the left? And that's as I mentioned earlier about the during the wildcard chat, right? One more week of information. If I see Son playing number 9 again, then it's like, yeah, absolutely no doubt. Next game week he's straight in. And obviously Saka, not Saka. Why? Salah, of course, he can do really well. It's no problem at all. But once again, I'm happy to let him, just see another game and then get him in from next game week, for example. So it's going to be a key game to see how they perform and just solidify some of the thinking that I've been having, whether to go all in on Spurs, for example. So at the moment, I'll only have 1 Spurs player and no Liverpool player. So I've got Porro. Currently he's sitting on the bench, but at this rate, with all the flags, I think he might just come on eventually anyway. And I don't mind. I mean, I don't expect any clean sheet, but he could get an attacking return. And yeah, obviously, if you've got any attacking assets from either side, you just play them, and I think they could do well. But equally, you could be in for a few surprises in terms of tactical changes or lineup changes, and you'll be kicking yourself for going too early. So if you got them, then yeah, no problem, just play them. But I'm still questioning whether going in now is a bit too early or not. Especially there's a lot of people going to make the free transfer from Saka to Son, especially if there's a little bit of a doubt remaining, which is not a bad move in itself. If they're going to sell Saka anyway next week on the wildcard. But once again, that's a decision that people have to make potentially without concrete information about whether Saka is fully fit or not. Because it's a huge game for them, right? I think he hasn't rested for like 80-something games in a row. If he's really, really injured, then of course they're not going to play him. But if he can play, I think he will play.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point about Son. He's doing great down the middle, but it's not forever, right? And with Johnson, if Solomon's not done enough, Richarlison could go back down the middle, and Son could go. I mean, Richarlison got goal and assist against Sheffield to turn the game. Like, why not? But I wouldn't say that puts me off Son, because Mira, who do you think is going to play right back? Do you think it's for Liverpool? Do you think it's going to be Gomez or Kwanzaa?
I think it's probably going to be Gomez, because Gomez was rested during the week as well. I don't see Trent being fit. He might get some minutes, potentially. I think he's due back soon. Remember actually exactly when he's supposed to be back. We haven't really heard too much about his injury at the moment. I feel like all the Newcastle players are taking the limelight at the moment with all the injuries. But interesting point about like what the front line could be. I've been sort of this season taking a bit of a stab just in my sort of notebook, what that sort of front line would look like with the teams, and it's been hit and miss because it's been so difficult to predict how Klopp's going to line up. And I was just thinking about what we've got to play with at the moment. So I think Darwin got about 60 minutes, roughly. Last night's matches. So it's possible that Darwin will start again. It is possible. He has been playing really well. He causes havoc when he is playing as well. I think he's the type of player that they probably need up front there. But then having said that, Jota as well, Gakpo, they're all sort of really solid, front play in the middle, right? I can see Diaz starting. Diaz got rested, so I reckon Diaz will be on the other side, and obviously Salah. It's really down the front that we don't really know. My gut is saying that Darwin will probably start and probably get subbed off again around that 60, 65 sort of minutes again, and I reckon Gakpo could start sort of just behind and play that false nine. So I've got a feeling I think you're spot on there. Feeling that Gakpo could probably play that role and still have Darwin play with Jota coming on, or it could be the other way around. So Jota's playing up front potentially. So yeah, hard to say. It's just the type of match. I'm expecting loads of goals as well. Expecting a lot, at least sort of. I think you said 4-4 or something. I was, had written down a score of actually 3-3, just because Liverpool are loving the number 3 at the moment. So I'm down for that. But it's definitely going to be a goals fest. I could see it sort of either side, but I think it's going to come down to the battle of kind of perseverance and I feel like Liverpool going down pretty much every game that they've played, other than their first match, which was a draw against Chelsea. I have no idea how that ended up being a draw, given how much how poorly Chelsea have been playing. But given that they've been down every single match since, right, at least 1-0, and then
Villa.
sort of winning 3. Yeah, that's right, Villa. But then they've been they've had that comeback in the second half, right? And so even being down to 10 men in 2 of those matches, so they've still come back and won that match. So I don't know, it's going to come down to how, like you say, how they played against Sheffield was pretty poor, the way Spurs played, right? So that was, I don't know, that was just Sheffield probably dropping the ball a little bit there when they saw 12 minutes go up on the extra time, and so injury time, right? So yeah, I reckon it's probably going to be like a 3-2.
I asked about as well, specifically about the right back, because when TM mentioned that Son could be back on the wing, it'd be against your right back, and Gomez is probably still having nightmares about what Neto did to him. So if this
100%.
So if Gomez is at right back and Son gets pushed out to the wing, I'm still happy with that situation, because Neto absolutely did. So if it is the youngster, was it Kwanzaa? It's a youngster against Son. If it's Gomez, Son's better than Neto in my opinion, and I don't think that's the worst.
I think it's a win-win, right?
Yeah.
Like at
Wherever
the moment,
he
if
plays.
Trent's not playing, yeah, exactly, it's a win-win. So
Even
I think
if Trent
Son
does play, I think that's fine, because I don't
Exactly.
really rate Trent as a defensive defender. So
Oh,
I'm happy with Son on the left.
struggle is real.
Yeah. So even if Son is pushed out wide, I know but look, like Big Ange is infamous and famous for not getting close to his players. So a lot of people will be like, "Oh, Richarlison, he's having a hard time. Let's boost his." He doesn't get to know his players. that close. He will choose the best team and the best formation and the system that he thinks. If Heung-min Son keeps playing down the middle and scoring the goals, I'm sorry, Richarlison, you're not in the picture right now. So I don't think it's going to be like Solomon did all right, so let's push. You're sacrificing 2 positions for 1. You're taking one of your best players from down the middle and putting him to the left and putting another player down the middle just to make one change, instead of just putting Solomon in for Brennan Johnson and keeping everything else the same. So I don't think Son will change, because I don't think Richarlison gets in just because, give him another chance kind of thing. But
I think it's too soon. I think Richarlison's obviously working through a bunch of things, right? And it was a huge confidence boost, coming on. I can't remember how many minutes he got in that Sheffield match, but getting the return. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so getting a goal and an assist in that time, it's a huge confidence boost. But I think it's too soon, and I don't think this is the match where he gets more minutes.
No, and he got 11 minutes against Arsenal. But do you want to throw him on for 90 minutes when it's a really big game and he's still working through some stuff? When you've got Solomon there, I personally wouldn't. I don't think that's a... Because then if it does go right, here's your other chance. I'm putting you in this big pressure game against top 4 rivals Liverpool, and he has another bad one. Whatever he's been slowly building up now, he's just gonna go all the way down. But anyway, let's crack on to this is a one-sided fixture we're looking at here. Despite a double game week, it's Newcastle against Burnley. So Lucian, how are you? I mean, we're looking at one side. Let's be honest, guys. We're looking at one half here because we're looking to wildcard him in. A few of us have at least one Newcastle defender. Could be 2, even 3 Newcastle defenders, or 2 Newcastle defenders and a midfielder or forward. So, Lucian, how are you feeling about this matchup?
Oh. Yeah, the narrative is kind of set for us, isn't it? It's a tricky one because, I mean, I speak to a huge range of people who have different mentalities, outside our little Twitter bubble that we have here. And yes, the smart money is on to having a Newcastle player. And I have heard murmurs of people owning forwards such as Koleosho and Amdouni in the double game week instead of Luton players. So I'm going to start with Newcastle because, yes, the obvious focus should be on Newcastle, especially after that 8-0 drubbing. And really, the good news here is that Burnley, right, Rob? I'm not sure whether you remember us talking about Burnley in preseason. It's a game, or at least it's a decision of stick or twist. We knew that Burnley were going to get smashed, and Burnley got smashed multiple times. The problem here is that Burnley have not relented on their philosophy. They've just continued playing the way they play. So that's good news for us, right? Because we love Newcastle attackers against this type of Burnley defense. So really, do you want to have Newcastle double attack, or would you rather have double Newcastle defense? Because right now, right, the problem here actually comes from Newcastle's perspective, where they've not fielded Tonali and Joelinton in central midfield. Instead, they have Anderson and Longstaff, which performed horribly against Brentford. And if not for Trippier's set-piece deliveries, we would not have seen that thrashing. Because Sheffield United actually had arguably better XG than Newcastle prior to the first goal of that 8-0 thrashing. So there's a warning sign there. I think we were let off the hook a little bit, just let down by the lack of Sheffield United's quality in attack. And I think Burnley will be a little bit different in that sense. So perhaps the smart money is owning double Newcastle attack rather than Newcastle defense. So this is where we start our discussion. Do you guys foresee Tonali and Joelinton perhaps coming back into the side despite European games potentially threatening them? Or would you foresee a more practical, pragmatic Newcastle side that will aim to win 1-0, similar to that Brentford game, where they have Anderson on the left working with Gordon on the left side, as well as Dan Burn just keeping things solid at the back? So that's where we begin our discussion.
Yeah. So just to touch on, I'll touch on Burnley first, and you're right. What we said about pre-season is exactly the point that I said pre-season when I said Company was used to managing a stronger team in a competition. So when he was in, he was at Anderlecht, and then he was in the Championship with Burnley, he had teams that were the better quality ones in that division. So it's all well and good playing trying to emulate City when you've got a stronger team in the division, but then when you are now one of the weaker teams, and you're right, they still haven't changed, and they're still getting beat. And he's not got the quality to do it. You know, it's good in theory, but that's not going to change. So the idea of potentially looking at Newcastle attack is massively valid, because Burnley are still going to try and play football, which is it's admirable, but it's not going to keep you in the Premier League, right? Something's got to change soon. I'm not saying that they should Sheffield United and like they did against Spurs and go up and shut up shop and try and grab a win, but sometimes you've got to play ugly. You know, my team Bolton for many years, that's how we used to stay in the Premier League, right? But going to Newcastle, I think I like that, the idea of a pragmatic win. But they're at home, and I feel like if Newcastle can get 1 or maybe 2 goals early, they get the tails up and they go for it. And then if Wilson or Isaac doesn't start and then the other one comes on later on, they want goals. And what happens is that's when it steamrolls. Now, if it gets later in the game and it's only 1-0 and it gets to 60 minutes, they'll shut up shop and keep them out, because I don't think Burnley can break them down. I think we need to... A problem, because we're all about to wildcard, and a lot of us are going to have Newcastle players in, which we planned since pre-season, right? Because we saw this fixture swing for Newcastle. Finished in the top 4. They had a difficult 5-6 game weeks, and then the fixture swing. So we were all thinking of wildcarding them anyway. It just so happens that they've got this ridiculous score just before we're about to wildcard, where Trippier with a hat-trick of assists, goals for Botman and Burn, was it 8 different goal scorers, so they all look fantastic. We want to get them all in, but I think sometimes we need to remember that Newcastle is probably a team that will grind 1-0 wins rather than 8-0 wins, or 5-2 wins or something like that. So I think I still think looking at the defense, 2 defenders for me, I think is reasonable with the run that they've got and the value. So Trippier, we've talked about earlier. If you've got Haaland and Salah, you probably can't go there. So you're looking at Botman, Burn, Shah, right? But the attack, it's exactly how I feel about Darwin. If you can deal with your striker doing something like 75 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 75 minutes, 10 minutes, 90 minutes, 12 minutes, 50 minutes, you can deal with that and you believe in it, and you've got no one else on your mind who you want to bring in, then bring in a Newcastle striker as well. But you've got to understand it's a risk. There's never going to be... You can say what you want about rotation. Oh, he prefers him for Champions League. We don't even have that history because they've not been in the Champions League for like 20 years. Right? So this is... If you are wildcarding this week or next week and you're looking at this game, I still think it's that setup. I think it's 2... Oh, we lost Lucian. It's 2 defenders and 1 attacker. Wouldn't go... If you go 4-5-1... And you change your Newcastle striker to Trippier, you could maybe do it that way. But yeah, in terms of this game, I can only see Newcastle here at home with a solid win. We'll go to Mira before Jen. Mira, what do you think about this matchup?
Yeah. I have to agree. I don't think it's going to be, like Lucian said, it's not going to be similar to Sheffield. Burnley are decent, I would say. And I imagine Company will be playing them. They'll probably play pretty deep as well. So yeah, I just don't see it being more than maybe like 2-0, 3-0 at the most. I reckon. Look, I'm a Wilson owner, and I brought in Wilson, like massive sort of curveball after I decided that I was going to go Edouard up front, and I'm so glad that I didn't. Obviously, hindsight, wonderful thing. But I couldn't get to Alvarez, so I went. I was deciding to go down the Edouard path, and I was already tripled up on City. So I couldn't sort of make the obvious move, and I also didn't want to make the obvious move, but it was very tempting. And look, just to have a bit of fun and just think about, and this is where I was probably leaning towards a wildcard 8, 9 anyway. Probably leaning a little bit more towards the 8 after sort of deciding I was going to do a 9. And so I thought I could bring in one player that I don't have to transfer out for the next 2 game weeks, and that will probably play with, seeing that Isak was getting minutes in the Champions League as well. I thought, yeah, I'll go with Wilson. It just seemed like, I was working out the probability sort of aspect of it, like you say, Rob, that there's just, it's a risk. It's a risk. And if you're okay with Wilson playing 60 minutes, or even coming on for the last 30 or something like that, they will go for goal. And Wilson is your sort of, great number 9 when you look at a traditional number 9, right? He's there, he's ready to kind of spring on. I couldn't believe the scoreline, right? Like after I woke up on Monday morning and I saw 8 goals, I was like, oh, surely it's a Wilson sort of hat trick or something like that. And I just see this whole waft of names underneath the scoreline. I'm just like, what the hell is going on here? Wilson just got one goal. Like eventually, I got to Wilson and saw one goal there. And
Isak as well, right? So they both scored.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they both scored. It's like everyone got a goal. Yeah, look, I think just going by, I'm gonna sort of, I feel good with what you said, Rob, earlier about you can't trust Hal with what he is saying about his players right now with the injuries, right? I'm going to hold on to that feeling because I think Wilson will play. I reckon he'll be okay. He will play. If it's not a 60 sort of thing, he's probably going to get like 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, but he will probably play and will probably get a goal at the very least. So look, from that point of view, if I don't wildcard in game week 7, then I'm going to be holding on to Wilson. I just don't see who I would want to bring in at the moment, even if it's just for one game week, especially if there's a Saka issue. So I'm feeling good about this particular fixture. I've got Trippier as well, and so I can see another, bag of like assists coming there from Trippier. So, I'm happy that I went down like that pathway. Yeah, I think it's going to be probably no more than about 2 goals, I reckon. Probably, nil. Look, I've got decent defense, so I'm not inclined to bring in another Newcastle defender. However, I think the only plot twist that I may have ever so slightly is that I'd be tempted by a Pope, like bringing in Pope instead, because and that's if you're wildcarding as well. Like it's not a bad shout, sort of going down Botman Pope kind of combination or something like that. Just because of the fixture runs that are coming up, but also this could be a good fixture if you're fed up of your your goalkeeper as well, and you don't have any other issues in your team. I doubt that because there's flags everywhere. But Pope is an option as well.
Yeah, I did look at that. It's just 5.5 is $1 million more expensive than 2 defenders.
That's the problem.
But here's one that's going to scratch some heads though. So yes, don't believe Howe if they're injured, but the same thing that we've talked about, Maddison probably playing because he's against Liverpool, and Saka could potentially get rested because he's away at Bournemouth. Two sides for Newcastle here. One is there's not many players who can come in and play. For if Botman and Burn are injured, they're struggling, right? They've got Lascelles and that's it. Forwards, if Isak and Wilson are injured, who the hell are going to play up front? But if some of them are injured or got a knock, they've got PSG in a week at home. So if you're going to rest a player who's not 100%, it's going to be at home against a newly promoted Burnley side. So that's the issue with, it's not just the flags. If they didn't have flags, there could have been some rotation anyway because they've got Champions League now. But the fact that they have a flag, like Wilson and Isak have a flag, and they've got Champions League, is he going to risk both of them? Maybe one of them plays 90 minutes and just gets through to keep the other one fit for PSG, right? you just don't know. I just feel like if
No.
there's ever a chat, if Wilson is more hurt than Isak plays the 19, you hope Wilson and Isak are fine for PSG. You wouldn't necessarily risk both of them for no reason. So that's just something to keep in mind, that we know rotation is coming, but PSG is the big one. And if, Dan Burn is unwell is one of the most silly ones that I like. Oh, he's got a groin strain or a hamstring pull or whatever. I get it. But he's a little unwell does not tell me anything about what's going to happen this weekend. But if there's... So Burn usually is left back, right? There's no reason why Target can't play against Burnley, because they don't need a fully defensive back four of Burn, Trippier as the one attacking one, Shaw and Botman against Burnley. They can play Target, and he's just got 90 minutes. I think he played 90 minutes Target, right, in the cup. Target can play 90 minutes twice, and then he's not going to play again for another month. Like, unless there's an injury, right? So I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we see a Burn bench in this week, because rest him, because they want a defensive left back against PSG. So just something to keep in mind. Tien, your final thoughts on Newcastle Burnley?
Yeah, so just throw in a couple of quick stats here, right? We talk about, like, don't think that Burnley's going to do another Sheffield United, and I think it's perfectly reasonable to say so. Even though Burnley has conceded 13 goals so far, which I think is second worst behind Sheffield United. But in terms of like XG conceded, they're much better than Sheffield United. But they have also conceded nearly 4.3 goals more than their XG conceded. So they very underperform in terms of defending. In terms of big chances as well, like much better than Sheffield United. But saying that, they conceded almost twice as many chances on the left flank compared to the right flank. So Trippier owners should be very happy. And that's one of the reasons why, as I said earlier, I wouldn't want to wildcard now, because wildcarding now means that I almost can't hold on to Trippier. I will have to sell him and maybe get a Botman or a share instead to use the fund elsewhere. But I'm a very, very happy Trippier owner for this game.
Well, but just final point then, Burnley have the lowest XG from open play. In the whole Premier League. So yeah, if you've got defensive assets, hopefully they play. But again, Trippier, Livermento's just got 90 minutes. Managers like putting minutes in legs. Livermento could play League Cup plus Burnley and save Trippier for PSG, right? Depends on what they're doing. It's tough. How's one of the worst ones to do? People could hold Trippier now, right? And then he doesn't play Livermento. But Livermento is a fantastic backup, by the way. I just want to point that out. That's such a good signing. Incredible, protege, right? Trippier gets older. Livermento could be the next Newcastle wing back for the next 10 years, right? So that's fantastic. So
put that out into the universe.
I think it's such a smart move. I think it's
the best way.
Incredible.
The best way to rest Trippier for the PSG game, take him up at 65 minutes, bang the clean sheet.
Yeah.
That's the dream. That's the dream, man.
But that could that could also happen. Like, Howe's not used to being a manager towards the top of the table. You don't want to relent. You don't want to sort of rest on your laurels. He does push his teams hard, right? I don't think it is going to be like, oh, it's Burnley, let's just play our reserves. I think he wants Newcastle to stay near the top. And look, Man City will be at home against Luton, and they don't rotate their entire team. Haaland will still probably play in those fixtures. So why is Newcastle not going to do it? Finishing off with...
sorry, just one. Yeah, sorry about that, Rob. I think Tien brought that reference up because that was what Howe did exactly against Sheffield United last week. He literally brought Almiron, Wilson, and Trippier off for Tonali, Isak, and Livermento. So I think that's where the omen is.
Yep.
So it could happen again, and that'll hopefully be after a clean sheet, right? So, and it's still 5 subs, right? So, he's making use of it. So take him. You're 2-0 up or 3-0 up. Things are looking good. Take him off. But then you're running the risk of if it's not so easy going and you take him off, you throw away points. But anyway, going on to what I've said here is the changing of the guard match between Brighton and Aston Villa. So we said earlier about wildcards coming up. A few of us have Brighton assets, maybe start to slowly sell them. We're really looking at Aston Villa for this nice run of fixtures. And I think it'll be an interesting game. The start of the season, looking back in Game Week 1 when it was Newcastle Villa, we had these guys similar-ish. I would say Brighton and Villa are also similar-ish towards that sort of top 10 to top 8 hope of where they want to finish. And yeah, Lucian, take it away. What's your feeling about this matchup?
Well, this is really difficult because, well, first and foremost, right, the reason Brighton are being dumped really is not because of how bad they are. They are still a good team. They can beat Man United 3-1 one week. I mean, woe to those who let go of Brighton assets in Game Week 4 when their hard fixtures, quote-unquote, began, right? I mean, dropping Joao Pedro was a reasonable move because after Game Week 3, he only had 90 minutes. No, he only started the game once out of the next 4, which was against Man United. But for everyone else, Mitoma, March, Gross, whoever, anyone that had starting potential in the hard fixtures, smashed Newcastle 3-1, smashed Man United 3-1. So, I mean, Brighton are basically fixture-proof, and we only drop their players because we know that they are due a rest due to rotation from Europa League commitments. So, I mean, really, the changing of the guard comes down to my version of attacking the template. If Tien wants to jump on the template early, I would say give the existing template time to slowly die off. If Brighton attacking potential doesn't die down, why let go of Brighton, right? So, our focus this match, however, is on Villa's shiny new striker, Moussa Diaby, because everything not just revolves around him. It's basically the way Emery has let go of his competitive advantage from last season. The thing about Emery, at least from his Sevilla and his Villarreal days and his Arsenal days, is that he tends to use a magic box, and that establishes a competitive advantage, whether it be for Arsenal or Villa towards the second half of last season, right? The thing about this season is that both his playmakers, his jewels in the crown, Buendia and Jacob Ramsey, are both out for the long term. So the question is, did Douglas Luiz take over the mantle? Did Leon Bailey take up a number 10 position, inverting from the right side? Absolutely not. He tried McGinn on the left, and he's trying Zaniolo now. But it's been underwhelming so far, and he's basically abandoned ship in terms of his magic square. So they've gone a lot more direct, and that's why you've seen more of this 3-5-2 popping up with Matty Cash on the right side, attacking down the flank really hard, and inevitably when Moreno comes back from injury, we're expecting the same. It's had mixed results. Some games, they can win 4-0 against Everton, completely coming out of the blue. Sometimes they'll lose 4-0. They've lost 5-1 to Newcastle, basically down the flanks. They've lost 3-0 to Liverpool, basically losing down the flanks as well. So they live and die by their flanks. And the irony here is that Moussa Diaby is getting all these chances centrally. I mean, even the game against Chelsea, right? Majority of their chances were conceded down the flank. So that's where we begin our discussion. Who will win the flank battle between Villa and an extremely flank-heavy Brighton side? And secondly, will Villa actually rely on Moussa Diaby finishing off their chances, or will they rely on their quote-unquote volume striker, Ollie Watkins, right? The hard worker that never stops. Will he come up with the goods once again with this solid 9-pointer that we all love and rely on? So we'll start from there.
Yeah, I said in terms of the game, I'm excited as a Diaby owner because I want to see that pace against that Brighton defence, and Watkins has got good pace as well. So Brighton are just good. We can analyse like what De Zerbi does. They took the reserve team to United and smashed them. sorry, Tien, that Brighton did, right? So Brighton are fixture proof. This is going to be a difficult thing if it has goals. I think this game has goals for both teams, but Mitoma's probably going to do well, and people are going to Estupinian might pop up with an assist. It's like, do I sell him for cash? Like, it's gonna be tough. Sometimes you say about Brighton are quite wing heavy. I feel as though sometimes Villa can be beat through the middle if they have that 4-4-2 shape, where it's like Diaby is more up with Watkins. So I think that's where Brighton might steamroll them down the middle. But I just think it's really tough to say. The key thing for me in terms of FPL is I am happy to go without Brighton to game week 10. Rotation is going to be a big one, because in the past when you had them, you had March, you had Mitoma, week in, week out, not a problem. Estupinian, they've been dropped, they've been rotated, and there's just no telling. I feel as though De Zerbi has full faith in his entire squad. So just brace yourself that if you are going to hold on to Brighton assets, doesn't matter who they're going to play against. They went to United and rotated. This wasn't a home game against Luton. They went to Old Trafford and said, you know what, we're going to play these lads because they care about the system. That's the way Brighton is. It's about the system, not the player. And they still did it. But in terms of Villa, I'm just looking at Cash, Watkins and Diaby, and that's a midfielder, defender and a forward, so you're looking at every position. Even Martinez as a 4.9 million goalkeeper isn't the worst. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. Mira, what do you feel about Brighton Villa?
I have to agree with you guys. Like, the Brighton are good. They are pretty much fixture proof. Love watching Brighton play. They're just so class. Like, when they are sort of, like in the their last match, right? Like, against Bournemouth, right? Like, where Mitoma got 2 goals, and oh my god, that hurt. That really did hurt. So I've only got Estupinian, in my team, and the whole time I knew like just how high Mitoma's EO. Don't know if that's engaged managers that have Mitoma still in their team. I think those. There you go. Yeah. So Lucian, you still, yeah, exactly. And so there are a lot of engaged managers that do have Mitoma in the team, but a lot of managers who are probably not playing anymore, who brought in Mitoma from game week 1, and they still have him in the team as well. So it'll be interesting to see when Brighton go through their slightly what's deemed as a difficult fixture run, whether Mitoma is still as highly owned as he is. And same with Estupinian as well. So I'm currently, if I wildcard in 8, I'm actually holding on to Estupinian. I feel like he's picture proof. Like, there is like the benching headaches that I'm kind of accepting, with holding on to him as well, because that could happen. But look, I think Brighton will outscore, Villa in this match. Not sure what kind of Villa will turn up. I'm honest. I just don't know. Like, it's really hard to say. Like, I feel like they've got a bit of like multiple personality disorder going on, where one week they're playing like football, right, and everyone's on it. And I've loved watching Cash just bombing it down and just playing like he is. It's so great to see. In fact, Cash is probably one of the players that I would probably want to bring in. I've got Gabriel in my team at the moment, so I'm happily, I'm going to ditch him. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I've still got Gabriel, but then he's been keeping the clean sheet as well. So I was like, all right, you are not a problem for me right now. So fair play. But yeah, I'd probably get rid of Gabriel and bring in Cash. It's pretty much the same kind of like from a cost point of view, pretty much, like for like, it seems like. But for me, I think it's going to be like, so you mentioned Diaby, the idea of having Diaby, but I was also looking at Douglas Luiz, right? Like, I'm not sort of hot on that, but I think it's more so for the pens. And if I'm thinking a budget asset, to have in my side, because I can't afford to go Diaby because I've decided I want to, bring in Saka later and sort of want to hold on to a mid, then I don't mind that. It's a player that I can sort of bench as well. I just don't know what kind of team is going to turn up basically with Villa. And I think like at least with the Brighton assets, I feel like I could probably, go for a Matoma or even like a Pascal Grosch. There's potential there. Ferguson up front as well, depending on how Ferguson sort of continues to play. And João Pedro is dead to me, so I'm not even going to go there again. But yeah,
Ferguson's
I
yellow
think
flagged as well, by the way. Just to...
Yes, I know. Yeah, this is it. It's like everyone is flagged at the moment. But I think Brighton definitely have this. I think it's not going to be as easy as I'm probably making it out to be. But they just look so much more elite at the moment. And like you say, Rob, it's about the system. How they're not sort of centering everything around one or two players. They've got a really great system there, and it's like they are leaky as well. So I'm not expecting clean sheet here, but I feel like they're going to get the better of Villa in this fixture.
Yeah, it's like the example I said when Estupinian didn't play against United, Lamptey did, and Lamptey got 2 assists. It's got nothing to do about the player. It's but I said the same thing about Villa. And I said the same thing about Newcastle before Brentford. Like Villa and Newcastle, I just couldn't put my finger on what was going to happen. Like they're going to win 3-0 or lose 3-0. Pretty much that's it.
Actually, that's a really good point that you raised there. Like Lamptey is 3.9 mil. So, if you're looking for an under 4 mil sort of bench fodder, but also at the same time risk of Estupinian not playing, it's a wild card
risk.
Sort of. It's a risk, yeah.
He's a 3-minute man. He will come on for the last 3 minutes. And
you wouldn't play him.
Just bench him and hope as a sub. Yeah,
exactly.
Tien, before we're already getting late and we still haven't done our review picks yet.
Getting there. It's gonna be very short. I think as you guys said, I agree completely. I don't think there's much to learn from these two teams. We know exactly what they are. So we're just gonna go with the picks, and for Brighton, take the benching and take the rotation. They good. I don't have Mitoma. I haven't had Mitoma all season so far. I probably get him. If not straight on the wildcard, I'll have to definitely have a plan to get him in game week 10, for example. Estupinian, don't mind keeping him, bench him for a couple of games. Villa, Diaby is definitely would be very surprised if he's not on my wildcard next week. Watkins, I didn't see, but yeah, I think they known quality, so it's just a matter of what do you want to do with the assets in your team. That's all.
Just thinking about time. Are we going to postpone reviews and just do picks again? Because I know it's getting to like 11:40 your time in Oz. Because then next week we'll just not... That'll be our introduction. We'll definitely do review picks next week.
Yep.
Just because...
And then Ryan can do his own as well.
Yeah.
That's his own work.
We're waiting for Ryan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
I think sounds good.
Yeah,
we'll go straight to the picks. Yeah.
We'll do the picks. So Tien, you're the first one. So we pick a player, each position. It rotates every week. So Tien this week is a defender. Any defender for the next 4 game weeks. Who are you going for?
Yeah, so defender. I mean, it's very easy to take Newcastle. But obviously, we picked Trippier and Botman for the last game week already. So if you don't have either of them, obviously watch out for any injury news for Botman. But for this week, I'm gonna pick Matty Cash, as you can see on the picture there. So we've just touched on Villa there. I think they got decent fixtures. So Brighton, obviously, he's probably concede, but there's still a chance that he might be involved in some attacks. And then we've got Wolves, West Ham, and Luton next. And so 3 out of the next 4 games are home fixtures. And I think Villa have done much better defensively when they play at home Though obviously, only very small sample size, but much better defensively at home. And Cash has the highest non-penalty XGI amongst all defenders so far this season. So yeah, I'm hoping for 2 clean sheets plus maybe 1 or 2 attacking returns in the next 4 games.
Mira, you want to do Ryan's pick?
Yeah, sure. I can read out Ryan's pick. I think Ryan's pick would have been my pick as well as a Liverpool supporter. So Ryan's pick is Salah, and I'm going to read out what Ryan's written there because it's written how he would probably say it. So Ryan said, I'm picking Salah because of Liverpool showing that they are capable of scoring multiple goals a game, which is good from an FPL point of view. There is a chance that Salah gets some returns from it. Completely agree. Apart from that, Liverpool have some good fixtures from an attacking point of view in the next 4, and it seems like Salah could be rested European fixtures, so we hopefully wouldn't have to worry about that rotation.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you're a Liverpool fan, so I'm pretty sure, I'm not saying Klopp doesn't care about Europa League, but obviously the Premier League's a priority, right? He's focusing against
100%.
Spurs and not bothered about Europa League, right?
And he's dropped 1 point, right? Like so far. So
he wants top 4. He's not going to risk Salah against LASK Bulgaria when he's got the Premier League to think of, right? So I am going for a player who, if I'm wildcarding, it's a 50-50 call. I am going for Watkins. Mr. Consistent in points and assists. He's finally scored himself a goal right before Villa go on that nice good run. Brighton, Wolves, West Ham and Luton, with 3 of those games being home fixtures in the next 4. And I just expect him to tick along nicely, to be honest. Darwin is probably more explosive, but if you just want a player to just tick along with 5 points pretty much every game on average, there's nothing wrong with Watkins, and with the fixtures that he's got for how long are those fixtures good for? Game week 8 to 14, you could comfortably play him every week and hope for an assist minimum, which is probably what you'll get. That's what I'm gonna go for. And speaking of Aston Villa and the double up that I might have, Lucian, your wildcard pick. Any player in the entire game for 4 game weeks, who are you going with?
Well, if I were to wildcard this week, theoretically, whether I wildcard this week or next, there would be one name firmly within my squad because he basically enables everyone else. And he's still priced less than 7 million. Moussa Diaby is a shoo-in, not because of anything else, but really, once again, we are picking a player for 4 weeks, and I have to play the fixture game a little bit because this Brighton aside, we are looking at Wolves away, which is technically a derby, is technically a Midlands derby, which will be definitely favouring him, as well as Luton game week 10. I think that combination of Wolves, West Ham, and Luton basically creates this concoction of fixtures that favours Diaby. Not just as his number 9 role, but also the fact that Villa right now are definitely going to bang through the centre, at least I foresee in the coming weeks. Because to answer my own question earlier about Villa against Brighton, I do feel that this wing gimmick will eventually die down. That's the unfortunate thing about Villa, and they will revert to type. Moussa Diaby is a special player not because he's a fox in the box per se. He also has the capability of dropping deep into number 10 positions in order to facilitate play. That plays directly into Brighton and West Ham's weaknesses. Centrally, where he overloads spaces and creates chances alongside whatever other number 8 that plays alongside him. So that is what I foresee. Between the lines against Brighton and West Ham, and playing extremely quickly in transition against Wolves and Luton. So there it be.
So we'll finish with captaincy. It's tough. Here's why. Morris is 5% owned, right? So you don't need to captain him to be some superstar, because if Haaland gets a goal and Morris gets a goal, it's the same thing anyway. But just the ceiling is higher for Haaland because it's higher than everyone in the game. But here's why It's not just the double game week. It's so tempting. If you want to have some fun and you want to risk it, go for the double game week. It's Everton and Burnley. Everton away, Burnley home. Why not, right? But I would, in this specific game week, because of the current flag situation, I would suggest Haaland. Because if everything hits the fan and you go deep into your bench and other people haven't because of wildcarded or they didn't have your players, and you've gone from another captaincy option, not Haaland, you could really suffer this game week. So I've got, excuse me, Botman, Saka, Maddison, Chilwell. Chilwell's out. Let's just say Saka and Maddison don't play, or Saka and Botman don't play. So you're going deeper into your bench. And I don't captain Haaland. I'm not only facing players with a good 11, but I'm also facing, if Haaland goes crazy, and I've already got a weakened team as it is, it just feels like it's too much. So if you wildcard and those players don't play, great, you've got a foot up. But if you lose players through injury, like Wilson doesn't play, Isaac doesn't play, the Newcastle players, Saka, Maddison, Chilwell, all those yellow flags that we've got that a lot of people have right now, if they don't play and you go against the Haaland captaincy, that is going, and Haaland turns against your captain, that's really going to hurt your rank really, really badly. So it's tough. You want to have fun. You want to have a punt. You want to go for a captaincy. But Morris is 5%. Whatever Morris has done is going to get you points in your FPL side. And Haaland might not be 200%, which means his points might do something for you. And you can just have fun next week when you can go for Son as your captain or something, right? But in a week where you're looking at a lot of yellow and orange flags and some red flags in your team and you don't want to take hits, it might just be, it's sensible to captain Haaland. It's fun to not captain Haaland. That's my point. I take it everyone is Haaland captain. Anyone swayed anywhere else? Lucian?
I'm thinking of captaining Alvarez instead of Haaland. Thinking about
that's
it.
because you said about the man marking and Alvarez might have more space.
Yeah, that's a huge thing.
How many?
I think this is
you're
something
different.
that,
How are your yellow and red flags? Yellow, orange. How are you flagged?
I've only got in fact, my bench right now is actually Tarkowski against Luton, and I'm actually benching Kabore, and Sar is my third on the bench.
So you're fine. Unless we have some hidden news, you're not having a flag issue right now, right?
Well, I mean, you guys know the way I play. I've not owned Bukayo Saka ever, because I have to own Salah. I've dumped Marcus Rashford. I don't own any Man United. I'm so glad they're gone. So I'm like, not to say I'm completely against the grain, but the players I pick up that are with the grain consist of Spurs, Salah, and I still own Saliba. I love the dude. But yeah, I mean, my concept of going against the grain would be to go heavy on one team. So I've got Foden, Alvarez, and Haaland all in the same side for ages now, and I do not regret it, despite the lack of goals. Perfectly happy with that.
Alvarez isn't. I would like it. I would like it. But again, you're not in a situation where you're going to get double kill, right? Where you've got players injured and you go into a horrible bench and you didn't captain him. You've got a good team and you're going against Haaland, and you're still going with City, so it's fine. Mira, are you just Haaland all the way?
Yeah. I'm gonna have to see what's going on. I think like Saka. Love that, Lucian, that you've not had Saka ever. Like that's incredible.
Yeah, he started with Havertz.
Yeah. Oh God. Love it. Yeah. Look, I'm gonna have to sort of deal with other issues, and like you say, have issues in you want to go against the grain. Whilst I've got a weak bench as well, so I just don't see myself kind of going any other direction other than going for Haaland.
I don't have a weak bench, but it looks like I'm going to be playing Saliba, Anderson, and Ruben Dias if Botman is out. But that means I'm definitely playing like Etse, Rashford, Maddison if he's fit, Saka if he's fit, and then I'm probably getting Pedro. And I just don't know if Pedro's going to start. So
I'm benching Estupinian at the moment.
Yeah.
Right now, as it stands, I've got Walker, Trippier, and Gabriel playing. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because I
could pop a
got an
wildcard
option there.
tomorrow. I'm so it's a holiday in Taiwan tomorrow, so I've got
okay.
all day to sit and not do anything, and then panic, and then hit the wildcard, and then we'll see what happens.
I'm sure that'll happen.
Tien, are you going to join me? Are you thinking about the Morris captaincy?
No. So don't overcomplicate things. When you talk about captaincy, you've got two candidates, for example. Just
Morris
think about the prospect of points, or any alternative. And for Haaland, it's very simple. When he plays Arsenal away, like next week, go against him. When he play against Newcastle, go against him. When he play Wolves, don't go against him. That's as simple as that. Sorry, Lucien. Even when he play Man United, maybe don't go against him. But once again, like, what do you expect? So I expect Haaland to score. Morris may score, but I don't think he will score more than one goal over the two games. So he got the good floor of 4 points. Hopefully he doesn't get a yellow card. So that's 4 points. And Haaland could blank, obviously. So that's 2 points. So you could look at like, okay, well, floor is higher, but Haaland's ceiling is massive, whereas Morris' ceiling is
not
lower. I think even with 2 games. So it depends on how you want to play and play your own game, right? We've been advocating that in this channel for a while now, and having fun is different for everyone. So my way of having fun is very different from the way Lucien is having fun. My way of having fun is playing the strategy game and deciding when to protect myself and how to protect myself, and having sort of like just poking every now and then rather than going all in attack every single game week like Lucien. So and that's perfectly fine. Just 2 different ways of playing, and it's 2 different ways of having fun. My having fun is not to suffer a massive rank swing against me when the opportunity is wrong. But when the opportunity is right, I'm happy to go for it with a clear plan of attack and an exit strategy as well. So I always come in anything with a plan of what I want to do, what I expect, and what if it goes wrong, how I react to it. So that's my way of having fun. And so yes, I'm going with Haaland.
Yeah, I think I say this like most weeks. It's whatever mentally makes you happy with the game. If you have Morris and you captain Haaland's like. I did like a post like Haaland's got to go. I don't care because he's so highly owned. It doesn't matter. He's my captain. I don't care. But it's still good. He scores goals and he gets me 1 point out of the 10 he scores or whatever. But if Haaland's my captain and Morris is my player and they both score, I'm happy because I'm getting points. If Morris is my captain and Haaland isn't, and Haaland outscores Morris, I'm very unhappy. I've probably got a big red arrow. Right, so why risk it? Risk it against Arsenal. Risk it against United away. When other players have got Luton and Sheffield United, right? So yeah, I love the Morris thing. There's nothing to back it up except like 2 penalties. That's what I'm thinking. Haaland maybe scores 1 goal and Morris scores like 2 penalties, and then I'm like, but if that does happen, I'll still be happy because my captain scored 1 goal and my big differential has got 2, right?
You know what the worst that can happen? They get a pen and he misses it.
And he's your captain. And
he's
Haaland
your captain
as well, yeah.
And it has happened. It has happened before. Like I captained Salah, I think, against Haaland, and then he got a pen, and then he misses it.
And it's called
Haaland blank. So Haaland. Yeah, no, not that game. I think there was another game. I can't remember exactly what game. But Haaland blank. So I was like, oh, perfect opportunity. Salah got a pen. It's like, yes, but he misses it. So
Yeah.
there you go.
And don't forget,
happens.
Everton fixture may not be as easy as what it seems. I mean, they
Definitely not easy.
beat
Definitely not
Brentford,
easy.
3-1. And that was, Brentford home as well. So yeah, it's don't know.
I'm just looking more to the fact that Luton's got Burnley at home.
Not an easy fixture either.
One easy fixture, yeah.
Playing Burnley at home?
It's an easy fixture for Burnley. It's an easy fixture for Burnley.
Yeah. So
I think the only easy.
Playing.
Yeah, I think the only easy fixture for Luton
is Luton.
is home against Sheffield.
Luton team game, training match. Luton against Luton
home
reserves.
against Sheffield United. I think home against Sheffield United would be an easy game for Luton.
You know what? I couldn't tell you what Luton did against Burnley last season. Maybe that's something I should have looked into. Like what was the score last season between Luton and Burnley?
Anyway,
don't know. But yeah, that'll be it for this game week. We will do that. We will start next week's show looking at 3 reviews. That is going to happen. That is going to be our introduction next week's show to look back at our picks. And Tien has been waiting to do it because he's hit gold every single week with his picks. So
surprise.
I might wildcard early just to bring in cash because Tien's picked him. So that'll be it. But yeah, thanks for joining us, guys. Likes and subscribes and all the good stuff, and we'll see you next Thursday.
Thanks for having me.
Bye. Bye.